What's up everybody, and welcome back to the channel and to another Outriders video. So often during my streams when I do carry events with audience members, one of the questions that comes up is which class I think is the strongest or the best class to carry with, and also which class do I enjoy doing these carries with the most. And that's the reason for today's video. We're going to be looking at what I classify as the ultimate solution for when you have to either hard carry people, meaning that they're very low level, or just carry people into CT15s that are struggling to complete, the later expeditions like 13, 14, and 15. Now, if you do find this video useful or you enjoyed it in any way, please do consider giving it a like, subscribing to the channel, maybe sharing the video with a buddy. It really does help the channel grow, and it just means a whole lot to me. But without any further ado, let's jump right in. Now, while you're certainly capable of carrying with almost any build in any class due to the fact that timers have been removed from the expeditions, it really comes down to a cross of efficiency as well as ease of play when it comes to me choosing which class I prefer to do these with and which one happens to be the easiest one to do it with. Of course, I'm referring to, as you can see in the footage in the background, Borealis Techno, using blighted rounds firepower and capitalizing on as much damage as possible to frozen targets. The reason why I think this build is as good as it is actually comes from two different areas. The first one being that it is incredibly easy to play and that you don't have to worry about anything like rotations and keeping certain stacks up, anything like that. Really, the only thing that you need to learn to be able to play this class well and to do well with it is keeping bullets up. In other words, that's having blighted rounds be active at all times, and of course you get this by shooting enemies and killing them and having that reload your magazine. Now, I mentioned two things, and so that's the one. And then the other thing is the customizability that you have with this build. Now, by default, there are certain mods which you definitely should have on here for the build to really pop and for it to really shine. But you do have some customization that you can do depending on what skill you'd like to use as your CC or your get out of shit button, if I can. So there's Cold Snap with Icicle Storm. You could pivot more into more damage and run things like Captain Hunter, for instance. There's really, the sky's the limit here in terms of what you can swap one or two of the mods out for being able to deal with different situations. As I've said, there's the slow and steady approach, which you have slightly less damage, but you're still able to progress through and deal quite a bit of damage, but you're playing it incredibly safe. And so you're not taking a lot of damage, you're shooting from far back, you're making sure that your bullets stay up, and it's just this kind of like a very comfortable, easy ride. The other side of it is playing the class a little bit more glass cannon-y, I would say, and obviously then front loading a lot more damage up front, but and being able to get these ridiculous 2 taps or 3 taps on an elite or a captain, but you do kind of like thread the needle and you do run a little bit hotter, a little bit more damage. You run a little bit more in the red, so to speak. So really, this customizability is something that I really enjoy, and if you play this class for a while and if you do carries for a while, it's something that you'll start to realize that depending on whether you're carrying people that are actually able to do damage themselves, so you don't have to worry so much about hard carrying, as it's called, or in actual fact, if you're taking a fresh level 5 or something like that and actually running them through a CT15, which you're very capable of doing with this build, of course. Again, like I said, the customizability of it is one of the appeals for me, because it really depends on how you want to play it. The package by itself, the blueprint as it is extremely strong and is incredibly versatile. And the fact that you are able to deal freeze damage to everything that you shoot at also gives you a high level of CC that, especially if you're facing single targets or targets that are coming directly at you, you can essentially always keep them at a distance, which is where this build really shines. And when it comes to the actual build itself, let's look at skills first, and from there on we can branch out and see why some of the decisions that I've made are present in this build, but also more importantly what you could replace them with if you want to go a different way. So for me, blighted turret, cold snap, and blighted rounds is essentially, again, a little bit of the cookie cutter here. Blighted turret is for us a method of introducing toxic to enemies. That's kind of like the side goal with using blighted turret. because of course your reload mechanic is based off of targets having toxic on them when you kill them. But that's not really the reason why we have blighted turret here. The main reason we have it, and we'll see this in the class tree, is because this is a ramp up mechanic for us for damage. So you can be vigilant and constantly be tossing out the blighted turret, and you will have a lot more firepower due to that. Or you can just kind of use it whenever you go up against a boss or a captain or elite. In other words, that you have this like ramp up button that's available on call and gives you a bunch of additional damage for a bunch of seconds. Now, Cold Snap is our get out of jail or our AoE clear button, and so Cold Snap combined with Icicle Storm, which is one of the mods on Borealis, gives us a huge clearing potential of trash. In other words, if you have a large cluster of enemies moving towards you, you can fire them all down one by one, or you can hit Cold Snap. It freezes most of them, and you hit one of the closest ones, and this causes this cascading crystal explosion that essentially kills everything that is frozen. This is extremely powerful, and again, like I said, you can choose to use this offensively. In other words, herd guys into like sort of like a circle of enemies, then use it and crack the whole group. Or like I said, you can use it when you're being pushed, when things are close to you. You can use it as an oh shit button. Again, versatility is key here, and that's one of the reasons why this works so well. Now, another option for an oh shit button for sure is also something like Fixing Wave. So you could absolutely use Fixing Wave as a way for you to always be able to get life back sort of on demand. And it kind of has a very similar cooldown to Cold Snap. So you kind of have to get used to Cold Snap cooldown being 21 seconds and Fixing Wave's cooldown being 25 basically. And so you kind of don't use them on cooldown all the time. You wait for the right time to use them, but disciplined use of those can really take you a far way. Last but not least, of course, we're using Blighted Rounds. This is a Blighted Rounds firepower build after all, so the build wouldn't really work without it. This is your bread and butter for damage. You can still deal fairly decent damage without it, but this is what really gives the kill potential to the build essentially. Now, when we go to the gear itself, I am running an absolute 0 on here because I want to access ultimate freezing bullets on the gun, which means every second that I shoot, I can freeze something. This freeze effect can be resisted, of course, but the point is it fires off more often than it doesn't. And again, as soon as something's frozen, it's CC'd, but also your damage ramps up, exponentially because you're using Borealis and because we're stacking so much additional damage onto frozen targets. Now on here, I'm using Killing Spree, and here's one of the first places where you can also differ. Now, if you want a much more controlled, slow, easy pace, Killing Spree is the way to go. However, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more, if you're looking for something that's a little bit faster, deals a lot more damage up front, Dark Sacrifice is the way to go. The difference between the two, between Killing Spree and Dark Sacrifice, is that Dark Sacrifice, that 75% additional weapon damage is available to you right from the start. You don't have to ramp it up. Whereas with Killing Spree, you do have to actually kill 3 enemies and then you add the 75. But you don't suffer the health drain effect of Dark Sacrifice. Now, you are going to be getting a lot of life in, so that counteracts the life sort of leech effect of Dark Sacrifice. But one problem with Dark Sacrifice, especially if you play in co-op scenarios, is that the entire duration that you're in combat, this life drain happens. And so there are going to be times, and this happens to me more often than not, that my teammates, the people that I'm carried, might be off to the side and might be getting harassed or pushed by 1 or 2 enemies. Now, during that time, I'll be, of course, continuing on with combat, but once I wipe out everything that is in my sight lines, I need to move towards them, and I actually need to kill these, 1 or 2 or 3 harassers that are on them. Now, in that time that I'm moving towards them, I'm still suffering life drain, and every once in a while, something weird happens, like one of those enemies, they could be a shotgunner, they could be something like that, actually then turns on you and drops you in 1 hit because your life is so low because you've been getting drained the entire time. Now, I have some things built into this build to counteract that, which we're going to look at when we get to the class tree and when we look at some of the nodes that we have. But the bottom line is accidents do happen. So if you want the safest possible choice with a sacrifice to the time that it takes you to start dealing your full damage, then absolutely Killing Spree is the way to go. If you are familiar with this class, if you're familiar with playing Blighted Rounds Techno, if you're familiar with playing this kind of way, then absolutely go with Dark Sacrifice, because that's going to feel more comfortable for you in terms of like the amount of damage that you can push out, and because you are already fully aware of how to get your life back. Now, in terms of your secondary weapon in a pistol, these don't matter because you are playing a blighted rounds build, so you're not going to be wanting to switch your weapons at any time, because of course then you lose your bullets effect. So really your primary weapon is the only one that matters. Now again, this build runs a assault rifle, but if I'm sure that there's going to be people saying, yeah, but you know, if you want the best possible damage, of course you should be using a tactical rifle. That's true. And that's of course an option as well, something like the Earthborn Renegade here with Bone Shrapnel and Dark Sacrifice on. But again, the thing is, we have a huge amount of damage that's available there for us to frozen targets, and that's why Absolute Zero is such a good fit. When we get to the actual gear itself, I'm using 3 pieces of Borealis: the chest, the legs, and the gloves. Now the gloves rolls max health, so you might be wondering, hold on, why don't you run headpiece, chest, and legs? The problem with the headpiece is the headpiece does have bonus firepower, but it has twins and painful chill on. Both of these mods are not really good for this build unless you want to run 2 cryo turrets instead of cold snap. But the point is, it's kind of like, for me at least, it worked out better to just use a purple piece here. So I still have firepower, that's okay, but I lose here, I lose some firepower here, so my firepower is not as high as it could be. It's not at like 210 or 208 where it could be. But the point is, every single mod slot can be utilized now and have something that caters specifically to this build. So the first 2 mods that I have on here, and by the way, your substats that you're looking for are always bonus firepower, close range damage, and long range damage. That is the staple of bullet techno. You want to have as much firepower as possible, and you want to be able to deal as much damage close and far away from you with a weapon. So I have Sharper and Bloodlust on here. They're kind of like you know, brother mods. They both kind of do the same thing, they just get activated differently. One of them you have to get kills while aiming down sights, which you'll be doing a lot in this build in any case, and the other one just basically boosts up your firepower as long as you're killing enemies. So these 2 together always stock you up with quite a bit of additional firepower, and this is the ramp up mechanic that you see with this class. As soon as combat starts out, you're at your weakest, but as you start killing more and more enemies, your bullets start dealing exponentially more damage. Then you throw a blighted turret, or maybe you threw one already at the start of the combat, so your damage just really ramps up. When we get to the chest piece, of course, just it goes without saying, but the Borealis set, the bonus that it gives is, it says that you deal 90% more damage against frozen enemies. This is a huge buff, and this is the reason why this is so great. It also says that critical hit damage is increased by 10% for you and all party members after you use cold snap. That's not the reason why we run this. We run it for that first bonus. On here we have Icicle Storm. This is the mod for cold snap that I mentioned, that when you cold snap stuff and then you shoot something, then it sort of like explodes and causes a chain reaction through all of them, because every time one of these guys pop, it does 252 damage, 252k damage to everything around it. And we also have dum-dum bullets on here because we are using an assault rifle, so that's 10% additional damage. Then when we get to the pants, we're using Euthanizer and Freezing Boost, and the trend that you're noticing here is we're trying to stack on as much damage that we deal to things that are frozen and things that are toxic. Both 2 statuses which we apply by default through Absolute Zero and through Blighted Rounds. Now on the gloves we're using Shatter and Radical Therapy, so you can just see it's just keeping increasing this damage to frozen and toxic things. And then last but not least, here we have our reload mechanism in Toxic Lead, which says that killing enemies afflicted by toxic replenish 40% of the ammo in your magazine. Now another option here of course is Trick Up the Sleeve, which is a Blighted Rounds mod which does the same thing. It just reloads less percentage of bullets, so not 40, closer to 30. And then on here I have a defensive ability, Damage Absorber. Now again, this depends on the kind of carries that you're going to do. If you're going to be hard carrying a lot of people, you might want to have a little bit more defensive capability to be able to withstand punishment from more enemies. Or let's say for instance, if you're running with competent people that are stuck at CT14, stuck at CT13, and they just need you to give them that little push into CT15, then here what you can do is you can potentially swap out Damage Absorber for something like Captain Hunter, because the other players are going to be mixing it up. They are going to be in combat, so you'll take a little bit of less damage, you'll take a little bit of less attention from the enemies, and you can focus on dropping them faster. Now, as mentioned, when we get over to the class tree, we are of course going itchy nose. We're of course going top tree because this is a firepower build, but I build it just slightly different if it's carries that I'm going to be primarily doing. Remember, there's a complete difference to if you're doing carries or if you're in a team and you're expected to be dealing the most possible damage. If that's the case, this build is not glass cannon enough. You can definitely scale way more damage out of this build by changing some mods around, by focusing with a tactical AR into something like crit stack with dealing more crit damage. But this is a carry build. This is for us to be able to carry our friends through content. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to actually pivot into these first two nodes here, which give you more HP and actually give you 20% resistance. That's going to really increase your toughness across the board. You can't see it because my fat face is in front of it here, but we have 27k HP. I can actually do this, and if it will just let me, I'm pressing caps lock. You'll see here that basically we have 26k, well, almost 27k of HP. But what's very cool is we have 30% resistance here, and we actually have quite a bit of why am I not seeing it? What's wrong with me? We have armor, we have 106k. So we're seeing our physical damage reduction almost 70%, and we have this 30% resistance, which helps us against anomaly damage. That makes this already a lot tankier than by default, and it means that you can take a bit more damage. Now, the reason why we go here is what we're actually losing out is only 8% of weapon damage and then 5% of weapon leech. This for me is overall the better solution because it just means that you start from a sturdier base. And then of course we do pick up exposing toxin and its sister node marked for execution, because what this says is when we give toxic to something, we also give it vulnerable. Vulnerable makes it take additional damage, and of course we are empowering that vulnerable by another 40%. We pick up the increased critical damage to our 15%, and then we just kind of go around the top where we're picking up nitrogen capsules, because there's this no man's land between close range damage and long range damage. And it's basically the difference between 12 meters and 18 meters. What this does is it shrinks that down so that you get the long range damage bonus from a much closer distance, basically. And that's really where the majority of your oomph comes from, is long range damage. And we're also picking up here, we want to deal additional damage to toxic. We absolutely pick up assault master because that just gives us a flat 20% increase on assault weapons, which we're using. We continue on just picking up assault weapon damage. We do pick up two sides of power, of the power. This is very much glass cannon. It means you take more damage, but you also push out more damage. We pick up sharpshooter because, as I've said, long range damage is where the real mwah of the build comes from, and this increases it by 30%, which is massive. We get UT14 clips. This gives us a much larger clip size, and bigger clip size means less chance of losing bullets and bigger reloads when you get 40% of bullets back. We do pick up purge here. Now I know that my face is in front of it here, so the node above it called charge gunshot, of course we don't pick that up, so we get purge. And then last but not least, we get empowering antenna. Now this ramp up mechanic that I was referring to before basically states that every time when you throw out a blighted turret, you get 40% additional weapon damage, and this is on a 10-second cooldown or decay rate. So for 10 seconds you enjoy this buff. Now the cool thing is your blighted turret is on a 7.1 second cooldown. That means that if you are always making sure that you're throwing the blighted turret as soon as it comes off cooldown, you just by default have 40% additional weapon damage, which is huge. It makes a fantastic difference. So that's basically the skill tree as a whole. And as I've said, just going along this bottom part here just gives us a little bit more survivability. That's it for the build, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments down below how you do your carries when you help your friends, when you help your audience members. Which character class do you prefer to play? Is it also for you the technomancer due to just the ease of play of it? Do you build yours slightly different? And if so, what is it exactly that you do different? Let me know. I'm super interested. But thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. It's just super important to me that you have a fantastic morning, a great afternoon, and an awesome evening wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me.